Okay, so what do we have left? We got our framework. With very little effort, we have hooked that framework up to the play button. Our loop that starts the game over is still working just the way it did before, but now it's under the control of the play button. The only thing we need now is sound, and we're done. So let's go ahead and take a look at the sound file again just to refamiliarize ourselves with how this worked before. In SoundLua, which is in the scripts folder, what we did in here is we had a function to listen for an event called onSFX, on sound effects, and it would load up the appropriate sound file and find a free audio channel and then play that sound. The two sounds that we had were click and explosion, which I made the sound effects for because they didn't play through the speakers. So Ed's mouth sound effects for video here. And the other thing we had was a function called play soundtrack, which previously just had this line: load up the sound file, play the sound file. Now I modified it a little bit to fit into the framework because I wanted people to be able to turn on and off sounds. So the first thing I did was I added another function to this module called enable SFX, which takes one variable, one argument, enable, and basically sets this local variable to true or false depending on what you pass in. So if you pass in true, this will be true, and then later on when I look at it in the play function, if it's not true, I do nothing. If it is true, I go on and find a channel, verify that I got a channel, and then play the sound effect. I also wanted to be able to turn on and off the soundtrack. Now this is a little bit different. With the soundtrack, the first time you play it, you want to start it playing. It's going to be playing, and then the person's going to get sick of the music. They're going to go click on the music button. If you're like me, you listen to the soundtrack the first time, and then you turn it off. So they go in, the music's playing, and if they click on the button, what you really want to do is just pause the soundtrack. You could stop it and rewind it to the start, but I find it's better if you simply pause it, and if they decide they want to listen again, they click the button, and it starts playing from the point where you paused it. So what I did was I changed this a little bit. I added a variable called local first play. And what this does is if first play is true, it does all the stuff it used to do before to load it and start it playing. And I also set that variable to false, so this part of the code won't execute again. Then assuming that they press the button to pause, which I'll show you in a moment, to stop the soundtrack, so they clicked it to play, they didn't like the music, they clicked it again to stop it. We'll go ahead and pause it by pausing the channel that the music is playing in, channel 1. And then if they click play again, first play has since been set to false, because we already executed this code, and we simply resume the channel. So if we look at the interface, what I'm talking about here is they click this, and you can't hear it, you may be able to hear it. The music starts to play. I click it again, and at that point, this piece of code here executed. Then if I click it again, it goes through here, and it says, first play is false, so resume. Pause, resume. Now what about the sound effects? If I look at the options code here, I've got these two functions on music. So this bit of code was executing when I clicked the music button. And what it was doing is it checked to see if the button was set to true. It is selected, in which case it would call play soundtrack. Otherwise, if it's false, it would call pause soundtrack. So this bit of code that we were just looking at. Oh, that soundtrack's driving. Can you hear the soundtrack?
No, and I just wanted to mention
Making
that
me
to,
crazy. Just a
yeah,
second.
I just wanted to mention that to everybody who's watching that Google Hangout's not going to play the audio for us, but if you download the code, which the link will be in the show notes, then you'll be able to see what Ed's talking or hear what Ed's talking about.
Here, let's see. Hopefully, you can see what I'm talking about. So again, I click it. When the button is highlighted, it does play soundtrack, which was this function I just walked you through. I click it, and it is not highlighted, so it's toggled off, because this is a toggle button. It executes this piece of code, which is pause soundtrack, which simply pauses. Similarly, there's one for the sound effect. If it's selected, I say sound module enable sound effect. I pass in true. And if we look at that code, that's this little bit here where it simply just takes enable and stores it in SFX enable, which again we use later to determine whether or not to play the sound effect when we catch this event. And if I click it again, it passes in. Oh, idiot! I'm sorry. Passes in false. Okay, yes, this is coding errors. This is what I get. So, and it passes in false to disable. So the only other thing I did then, that hooked that up to the library. We now have the ability to turn on and off our music and sound effects. All I needed then was to add some sound effects calls in different places. So where do I need them? Basically, I need a click every time you click on anything, a button, on the screen, and then I need the explosion sound when the player dies. So the way I do that is with these little calls right here. That's real nifty. I like to do it this way because it separates your code. So the sound effects code doesn't need to know about this code, etc. I mean, they're separated. I simply need to create this event. It goes out into the ether. This code here is listening for it, as we discussed on a previous episode. And it checks to see if it's supposed to play the music or the sound effects, and if it can find it, it does. So in any place where it made sense, so let's see, when you turn on the music, I play the click. When you turn off the music, I play the click, because I don't know if your sound effects are enabled. When you turn on sound effects, I first enable it, and I play the click. And then, if you click the back button, I play the click. And the only other place I need to play a click is in the touch. So in One Touch Lua, which is in scripts, we did this business where we would post the One Touch event, and for feedback, which I've turned off, we would change the color of the screen so you can see you had clicked. I just added this little call here, post the sound effect, click. Doesn't have to include the sound module here, it just sends it out into the ether. So the only other effect we need to hook up now is when you hit the wall and you die. So that's the explosion effect. So if you recall, there was a collision handler in player that did, among other things, handle the trigger. You hit the trigger, it would increase your score. But it also handled hitting the wall. And I left this little message in here so you can search for it. It says, I hit a wall. If you search for that in player, you'll find a call to post on sound effects. But this time, we pass in explosion is the name of the sound effect. And when you hit the wall, it will play the explosion sound effect once, and you're dead. And that is it. We finished the game.